Search for missing mom ends after her son talks to school counselor. Rebecca Hoover is a 38-year-old mother of 3 from Indiana who was reported missing when she vanished without a trace, for no apparent reason. After her mother didn't hear from her for days, which wasn't like daughter, she got worried something terrible happened to her. Her mother went to the closest police station and reported her missing, saying that her daughter's disappearance was completely unlike her, especially not with her son left behind. Even though Rebecca was going through some rough marital problems, her mother knew that even if Rebecca was ever to leave her husband, she would never leave her children behind. Her children were everything in her life, and there was no way she'd ever abandon them, no matter how rough things can get. The authorities launched an investigation and search, hoping that they'd be able to find the devoted mother and have her reunited with her 3 kids. Almost a month later, however, Rebecca's 8-year-old son made a very shocking confession to his school counselor that changed everything about the case. More than 3 weeks after Rebecca was reported missing, her 8-year-old son told a counselor at his elementary school that he had actually witnessed his mother's murder a few weeks back. He watched the whole scene as his mother's killer snuffed out her life right in front of him. According to the boy, the murder was none other than his own father, 50-year-old Judson Keith Hoover, who killed his mother in the basement of their home. The little boy said that he had watched the attack as it happened and saw how own mother in her last breaths. The school made an immediate call to the authorities. When the cops arrived, the boy had to describe to the police, in very graphic detail, what he had witnessed weeks earlier, around the time his mother was reported missing, according to the Courier-Journal reports. According to the little boy, he saw his father stomp his mother in the head 20 times, wearing black boots, while she was lying on the ground next to a black refrigerator in the basement. The child also observed Judson Hoover punch Rebecca Hoover in the stomach with a set of keys in his hands, but she was unresponsive and did not move. The affidavit continued, adding, "The child observed blood coming from Rebecca Hoover's head and left ear." After hearing and noting all of the disturbing details the boy had to share with them, the police approached Judson Hoover at the school when he came to pick up his children. The detectives were given full permission to search the Hoovers' property, where the investigators found what seemed to be blood splatter at the bottom of the basement stairs. And right after they received a tip from Rebecca's mother, the authorities obtained a search warrant for a storage unit in New Albany. When they reviewed security footage, the boy's confession came to clarity as the video showed Judson Hoover moving what appeared to be a body and dumping it into the unit. Judson Hoover was also seen on the security footage removing a 55-gallon container from the unit 3.5 weeks later after he was interviewed by the detectives on the case. A second search warrant was issued, this time allowing law enforcement to look at yet another storage unit in Louisville. That's where the remains of Rebecca Hoover were found in a 55-gallon container. Judson Hoover was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. When he was initially confronted with the revelation that Rebecca's body had been found, Judson alleged that his wife was the one who initiated the attack when she attacked him with a pipe, and that he only retaliated, according to the Mirror report. However, photos of Judson at the time of his arrest didn't show any sign whatsoever of injuries inflicted by such a weapon. Judson Hoover later pleaded guilty, telling the judge that he'd strangled his wife to death before he left her rotting in their basement. However, when her autopsy report came out, it told quite a different story. The medical examiner determined that Rebecca's cause of death was actually blunt force trauma to the head and torso, which are injuries consistent with their son's story. And it didn't stop there. Rebecca's body was also mutilated, but Judson insisted that he was the one behind her mutilations, as he has no memory of doing so, the News and Tribune reported. Judson was sentenced to 65 years imprisonment, according to Floyd County prosecutor Chris Lane. He will serve his sentence in the Indiana Department of Correction. Sadly enough, Rebecca's murder is only the last of her husband's violent outings. It was unfortunately not the first sign of trouble in her bloody marriage. Her family and friends told police and reporters that the couple's relationship had been abusive. In addition to that, her husband had already been arrested multiple times and was charged with a Level 6 felony for domestic battery in the presence of a minor and a Level 6 felony for strangulation barely 4 months before his wife vanished from existence. According to the court records, Rebecca was actually trying to get her husband to leave the house, and that's where he snapped, took her cell phone, knocked her to the ground, and started kicking her in the face and neck. Almost the same scenario that later led to her death. Judson Hoover stomped Rebecca about 15 to 20 times, all in front of the couple's 3 children. Judson used his feet to apply pressure to Rebecca's neck, and she could not breathe, the arrest affidavit said. That day, Rebecca was rescued by the same son who, 4 months later, would witness his mother's murder and help get the culprit behind the bars. The 8-year-old boy was able to flee to a neighbor's home, where he got the neighbor to call 911, according to Fox 23. Unfortunately, this time he was unable to save his mother, and all he was able to do was make sure his dad rots in jail after taking her life. Even though there was previously a no-contact order against Judson Hoover after the domestic violence case that happened 4 months before Rebecca was murdered, no order was in place at the time of Rebecca Hoover's death. After Judson was released on bail, their abusive relationship resumed, only to end up in her death this time. Hopefully, her tragic death can serve a purpose. This case is a brutal reminder of how domestic violence in the home can lead to tragedy, Prosecutor Lane explained. The strong sentence in this case is justified for the violent manner in which Ms. Hoover was taken from her family and her children, and the attempts by the perpetrator to cover up his crime. We can only hope Rebecca Hoover's story motivates others who are currently in the middle of abusive situations to seek help and get away from their abuser before it's too late.